From the center of the universe, now in its 7th season covering your 19-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast with Argos color analyst Ben Grant and Coach JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos post-draft special, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. My name's Ben Grant. I'm joined as always by JB, and we couldn't be more excited to get this draft special underway, as we are going to go through every single one of the Toronto Argonauts picks from the 2025 CFL Draft, and we will get you set for training camp, which is just around the corner. Plus, later in the show, we're going to be talking to Mike Hogan, who was in the draft room yet again. I love that they let him do that. And if you haven't heard the story as to how this came about and how Mike ended up being able to report on what happens in the draft room, he'll tell you all about that. It's a great behind the scenes peek for fans and media alike who don't get to ever hear about what typically happens in draft rooms, and he will walk you through it all. So all of that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. JB, I know you're happy. I'm happy too. We have Something in the Water back with us again as our title sponsor for this season. If you have not had a chance yet, you've got to, this weekend, get down to Something in the Water as soon as you can. Don't even wait for an Argos game. But JB, there's nothing more perfect than going to Something in the Water first and then heading over to BMO Field afterwards to catch the game.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be back at it, to have them on board, and I'm definitely looking forward to some beverages.
And it won't be long before Longboat Pale Ale will be out, the beer made for fans of the Double Blue. So you got to check that out. And in the meantime, you can pick up their beer at the LCBO too. Hazy Maitland, well, one of my favorites. It's 100% my top 3, and that's one that you can get at the LCBO. But if you make it down to Something in the Water, they got a ton available there. Seasonal stuff too, that you won't necessarily find all year round. So take advantage of that in Liberty Village. Something in the Water Brewing's really close to Lamport Stadium, just steps from BMO Field. Thrilled that they're back with us again. All right, JB, let's get this draft analysis underway. First of all, it's pretty cool that the Argos were picking 7th despite winning the Grey Cup, because you had Edmonton using their pick in the supplemental draft from last year. And then you had BC losing their first round pick to Calgary because they exceeded the salary cap by over $300,000. And so here the Grey Cup champions are picking 7. And you have to think the way this draft unfolded, they must have been thrilled with the fact that Jeremiah Ojo, their first round pick, was still there on the board. He was your first overall selection, wasn't he?
He was certainly the one I wanted for the Argos. I don't know if I had him number 1, but I certainly was I thought that there was a decent chance he could be there for the Argos. But yeah, I was really happy, because not only is he, a fantastic athlete, but he absolutely fills a hole. Anytime you can fill a need and get best player available at the same time, that is a dream when running a draft. So yeah, I mean the draft broke really well for the Argos. I thought for sure Ojo might go 5 or 6.
Yeah, he easily could have. And even earlier, you don't even know how this is going to go down. I think everybody had Connor Shea as their consensus number 1. I didn't, but the guy I had as my consensus number 1 ended up going at the beginning of the second round. We found out later on that there was a reason for that. There was a suspension involved that we didn't know about at the time, but he dropped right out of the first round. But yeah, the first guy taken was my favorite receiver in the draft, but I didn't see him going 1. That was Damien Alford to Calgary. And that, I think, stunned everybody, but that's what you get often in the first round of the CFL draft. So anyone could be there, but I was very pleased to see Jeremiah Ojo still there at pick 7. Now, this was something that you and I had talked about this before too. The Argos didn't need to rebuild their Canadian presence on the defensive line. They did throughout this draft, but it wasn't necessary because they have so much Canadian strength elsewhere. They're almost certainly going to start 4 Canadians on the offensive line. They're almost certainly going to start 2 Canadian receivers, and they're almost certainly going to start a Canadian will. That already is your 7 Canadian starters. And they've got a few other positions where you can start Canadians as well, of course. So it wasn't necessary, but with the departure of Robbie Smith, there was a lack of Canadian presence. Really, it's just Tyson Hergut in terms of experienced guys on that line. So they could have gone that way. And as soon as they picked Ojo, I'm like, okay, that's the replacement for Robbie Smith because he's very similar to Robbie Smith in what he can do, but he's on a rookie contract now. Robbie Smith, meanwhile, is the highest paid defensive player in the CFL. And so if you could get someone that can fill in, even if he can do 75% of what Robbie Smith could do, and I think Ojo's ceiling is as high as anybody's, then you're in a good position to be able to replace a fan favorite Robbie Smith in Toronto. So I'm really excited for Jeremiah Ojo. What do you think? You had a chance to watch some of Ojo's film, Montreal Carabin, defensive end, 6'2", 246. What did you think of Ojo and watching him play?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for a couple of reasons. I mean, first and foremost is that he's going to play. There is no delay, there's no invite, there's no training camp. He absolutely is now an Argo, can immediately get into the playbook, can immediately get involved. So I thought that, you don't often get that in the first round. So I was really happy for that. Like when you watch his highlights, I mean, I think the thing that stands out, is his speed and his pursuit speed. That he absolutely turns that corner. Now, look, it's Canadian ball, and I love watching Canadian university ball. It's not it's not the pros, but his first step is incredibly fast for a guy his size, and he closes with malice in his heart. So like I think he is definitely an edge guy. That he isn't huge, but I think that he is going to fit really nicely into the rotation. I think fans are going to really like what he brings because his acceleration is fantastic.
Yeah, it is elite. And you've checked the boxes on a lot of my bullet points for reasons to like Jeremiah Ojo. I've 50,000 words of scouting material here that I don't want to get into because I think that'd be the most boring podcast ever. But I will give you some bullet points on these guys as we go. So as JB highlighted, pros, like elite testing numbers. He's got that explosive get off, great first step quickness that we know the Argos love in their defensive linemen. That's something they seem to all have in common is that explosive first step. He immediately puts stress on the tackle because of that explosion. And the threat of him going outside actually opens the inside. He will cut inside when he feels he's got the ability to do that. And sometimes he'll win clean inside because tackles are so stressed about his speed around the edge. So that high motor JB talked about too, tracks down plays from the backside. He just never stops running. So those are things to love. In terms of cons, they're all coachable fixes in my mind. So he has a little bit of a reliance on speed and that sort of speed rush part of his game. He doesn't necessarily have the violent hands that you see from some other guys. That's just not his style, but he can learn to add that to his arsenal as he sort of builds his toolkit. And the other thing is sometimes I feel like he struggles to disengage once he gets caught up. It's harder for him to get off, and that's not uncommon for someone around 250 pounds or less. When you get caught up in a 300-pound tackle, sometimes it is tough to disengage, but that's something he could still work on. And I do like him much more versus the pass than the run, but I'm okay with that for a CFL defensive end because I want you out there defending the pass because that's mostly what you're going to be doing. So they get a guy that could come in and start right away, a guy that can come in and be a rotational defensive end, a situational defensive end. Great first round pick for your defending Grey Cup champions. So let's move to the second round, JB. And this is, I know, you might have had a player in mind as the second round was progressing, and you couldn't have been happy when the Argos traded back in the second round, ended up with pick 19.
I would look. I have loved their drafts, and who am I to question a team that's had such success drafting? And Ojo was picked. Great is always fun when the guy you want is the guy they pick. And I'm watching the draft unfold and nobody's taking my guy and nobody's taking my guy. And then, the Blue Bombers are up. I'm like, oh my God, they don't take them. I'm like, here we go. I'm going to go 2 for 2. We're going to get Jackson Finley. We're going to plug him in at high safety. Everybody loves him. He's going to be a doctor. He's going to save the world. He just, the most glowing, scouts were just weeping over this individual. And he dropped, and here we are. And then we traded out for for a sandwich and a firm handshake. And look, again, who am I to question? But I was disappointed that we didn't take Jackson Finley with the opportunity there. But clearly, the Argos, decided he wasn't for them, because I don't think there's any way they thought he would be available down the road. So in their scouting, they weren't feeling Dr. Finley, and did I turn off the TV? Yes. Did I text you? Yes. But a couple days have passed now, and all is good.
Yeah, and like you said, I think that wasn't a player they were necessarily targeting because, like, already at 16, that was a drop for him. Like, he was a guy that was being projected at the end of the first round, early second round. So at 16, it seems like if you're trading back there, then that's not the guy you're looking at. And so instead, they trade back. They pick up Paris Shand from LSU. Not a ton of LSU guys in the CFL, typically from the CFL draft at least. And so that's pretty cool. But he's got some exciting play to him as well. There's a lot to like, but this is a player you're probably going to have to wait for because of the fact that he has signed, at least for the time being, he's going to be in Buffalo with the Buffalo Bills. What do you think about a second round pick that you may not see immediately, or maybe even a guy that you'll see down the road?
Well, we talked about it. I mean, I think that the Argos are in a position of strength. They have a good to very good roster. So, and they're defending champions. They don't need to find guys who are going to start. And like if you're Calgary or if you're Hamilton, you need to find people immediately. So people who you might feel are better athletes, you can't take. So I like it. I think it makes sense to take advantage of that opportunity to go get guys who you might have to wait for, or potentially are recovering from an injury. Because if you hit, unbelievable. And if you don't hit, it's okay, because, your team is in decent shape. You're not in a position where if you don't hit, now you suddenly have a huge gaping hole in your roster. So I like it. I think it was a draft, like, when we jump ahead now, if you look at the rest of the draft, it's a very confident draft. It's a draft by a team that feels their starting lineup is very good. And, I agree. So I like taking the chance. LSU is a big school. It is hard to get, like you said, it is hard to get guys from big schools, because those big schools still carry weight with NFL teams. Like if a guy comes from a school like LSU or Bama or Clemson, they're going to get more chances and they're going to get more shots on practice squads than, teams that come from, Buffalo or smaller schools. So I think he definitely is probably at least 2 years away, but I don't mind. I like it if they hit. Look, you watch his highlights. He's clearly fantastic. I mean, he is a load.
Yeah, for sure he is. And like you say, like, to be able to afford to have lottery tickets is such a luxury. Like the idea of, like, I'll give you $100,000 today, or I'll give you $1 million 2 years from now. Some people are in the position where they need that 100,000 today, and that doesn't make sense to do anything else. And you look at the Argos, they are in a situation where they don't need that 100,000 today. They will wait for that million, because it just, if you can, it makes way more sense. And so that's what they're doing with a lot of these draft picks. And Paris Shand was the first one of these. So let me give you a little bit on Paris Shand. Listed 6'5", 290, weighed in at less than that with his pro day. His pros: NFL caliber length and athleticism, 34-inch arms for that position is pretty useful, and he uses them really well too. He's also got explosion off the snap, and he's a smooth mover. He doesn't, he looks way more athletic than his frame would suggest he is. He's also got that inside-outside versatility. He can play a tackle, and I think he's going to play tackle in the CFL. But He could have he's got enough speed and enough length to be able to be used in twists and stunts and come around the edge. And the defensive coordinator will know that he's not going to blow his contain. So I do like that little bit of versatility. And his ceiling is really high because I don't think we've seen it yet. I don't think we saw him at his best at LSU. I think that's still to come. And so while he is a bit of a lottery ticket, your reward potentially is very high. Now, the cons, the negatives, inconsistent hand placement. He gets very upright at times. It can sometimes get blown off the ball. His finishing strength, his tackling, it just needs a little bit of polish. And overall, in general, his game is a bit more potential than polish right now. But I'm perfectly fine with that at pick 19.
He's not quite as tall, but I mean, when you watch his film, his fluidity, I think that's such a great word. Like he reminds me of CN Power. That there's yeah, like exactly like you say, there's a grace to his movement where he's not crushing guys. You watch it, like like I think there's a decent chance he comes up. Like you watch his film and you feel like I don't see an NFL career here. I mean, to be honest, like it doesn't jump off, but you watch it and you think that is somebody who could really be a terrific rotational guy. You bring him in because he is going to be a lot to handle on the inside, in the same way that that Power was.
Yeah, no, I see that too. Just one of those guys that moves smoother than a tall man should. That's basically what we're seeing there. No picks in the third round. And so we jump to the fourth, where they open the fourth round because of trades with back-to-back picks. So pick 29 and 30. They start with another lottery ticket, 2 in a row now. Gavin Coates, center out of UBC. And the reason this is a lottery ticket is he didn't get to test because he's coming off an ankle injury and is not going to be ready to go at the start of the season because he's going to be in rehab for that injury. He doesn't need to right away, right? Like they're fine on the offensive line. They don't need a plug and play center. So to me, starting the fourth round, getting a guy that you project as a starter down the road is massive value. 6'4", 320 is what his, we don't have his we don't have accurate numbers for his testing and all those other numbers, but we can tell you still what we see on tape. And what I see there is a smart, physical, technically sound center. He can play guard as well and did at UBC. He's great with leverage, with pad level. He's got another guy with a great first step, strong hands. And one of my favorite things with him is he's got great awareness. He's one of those guys that, as he's engaged, whether it's in a double team or he's climbing to the next level in the run game, he always knows the right point to release and pick up the next guy. So whether it's a late blitzer coming in and he's double teaming a nose and he sees the linebacker coming in and is able to disengage at the right time, or whether he's combo blocking downhill and then has to peel off to pick up a linebacker, the timing always seems to be perfect, and he acts like he's been playing with the guard next to him his whole life. So to me, that's what stands out. The downsides are more just in the stuff we didn't get to see. Then without confirmed testing numbers, he's unproven in terms of his pro level speed. And we don't really know what his ceiling is because of that. And so those are really the only cons, but they're big ones because you want to have that testing data. The film doesn't always tell you the truth in terms of trying to gauge the caliber of athlete you're dealing with. The very next pick, this is a guy, JB, that we know pretty well. So this is Istvan Asibodadze out of Windsor, a guy that came from Peel, and we had the opportunity to coach against a number of times. This isn't a lottery ticket pick, but it was unexpected. This was a guy that didn't have combine testing numbers, and so it did seem early to me at 30, but there's a lot to like in Asibodadze in terms of his athleticism and in terms of what you see on tape. I think, first of all, he's got positional versatility. All the way back to high school, he was playing both halfback and corner. I know he picked off my quarterback a couple of times, and it really flashed that athleticism in his return game. So he's got some really nice what looked like on-field measurables that would translate well into testing if we saw those numbers. So that positional versatility, I like to start with. He's great with leverage, strong, really disciplined eyes, knowing where to look when he's locked up in man coverage. He's not going to peek early, but when he's in zone, he's reading those quarterbacks' eyes, and he's just well trained to know what's coming at him. He's a really nice closer. Times his jump really well. He doesn't always make the catch, but he always times the ball well to be able to knock the ball away on contested catches. And he's really confident in zone drops. His route recognition is really high too. And then maybe one of the reasons he's drafted here in the 4th round, he's a great special teams contributor. You really see it on kickoff team where he's got great lane discipline. He closes fast. And that's where, to me, where he flashes his best speed is on those teams units. And he comes in and just clobbers people. So I think that's more what the Argos are drafting him for right now as a special teamer who may have some positional versatility upside later on his career, can maybe look to get into the lineup more as a halfback or as a corner. I don't really see a physical hitter in him, and he might be a bit vulnerable to faster CFL players. Without a time, I can't tell you though. But still, 4th round, no problem with taking, even if all he is a special teamer, I'm completely comfortable with that in the 4th round.
Yeah, and I think that they feel pretty confident in their ability to coach up defensive backs. They've certainly shown the ability to generate starting caliber defensive backs from players who were not renowned. Weren't high draft picks. They bring them in. They bring in 4 or 5 guys that are kind of similar, and then 2 guys kind of move to the top. And now we have starters. You look at last year. Look at how many guys they rolled through. And then by the end of the year, I mean, they had 2 or 3 really great defensive backs. So I think they feel confident there. And it is interesting. They clearly do like drafting GTA guys. Mm-hmm. I think that's smart. I think it's good to have an edge like that. I think it's probably something other teams might not think about. And obviously GTA is going to create a lot of athletes, but I really like that the Argos do that. I think it makes a ton of sense to try and get Toronto guys drafted. They have their family here. They have a whole support system here, as opposed to when you're drafting guys and they're coming here from another area, and which you can do. But I think if you can take guys from Toronto, I think that's a really smart play because it keeps guys grounded in their first year or two because they have their familial, arrangements.
Yeah, and Parashand, a local Toronto guy, and Nasibo Datse, Brampton guy, GTA guy. I think it helps for second contracts, right? Like especially when the second contract is up. Like, first of all, it's great for first contracts. You got family and friends that can come and watch, and that's a benefit. But keeping guys around that you like, when they're local, it's way easier than when they're from Calgary and they're looking to go back home. How many times have we seen that where the Argos will draft this great player, but he's from out west, and time comes for the second contract, and it's just hard to keep those guys. So I applaud that as well, and I think that's part of what goes into a pick like this. Next up,
their significant other also probably from the GTA.
Right. Yeah, that happens too. End of the 5th round is the Argos' next pick. And this is a guy that I had crossed off my draft board. I had him on until the very last minute when I was cutting down to my top 100, and he didn't make my cut into the top 100 because to me, there were too many question marks. But for the Argos, I think what they're seeing here is another very high ceiling lottery pick. So the pick is Jalen Rayam out of UTEP. And he's 6'1", 220, 225. The reason I crossed him off is I haven't seen him play football since 2022. So his story is as follows. He was playing with Middle Tennessee and in 2022 had a monster season, looked like one of the best Canadian linebacker prospects there was, period. And unfortunately, after that, it was nothing but injuries. He missed the 2023 season with an ACL injury and then came back in 2024, took 3 snaps, and after the 3rd snap, had a re-injury to that knee and missed the whole season. And so you've got a guy now that has missed 2 entire years of football that we haven't seen any film on or any development on. Never really, only had 3 snaps at UTEP total. And so it made him far more difficult to project, and it made him an injury risk, but let me tell you what I saw in him when I went back to that 2022 Middle Tennessee film, because I saw a heck of a linebacker. You had good size, great football IQ, a guy that could really read keys and attack downhill. His tackling was solid, really good in pursuit, and in pass coverage, really functional as a zone defender. Not a guy I love to see isolated one-on-one against faster receivers, but again, that's not really going to be in his wheelhouse in the CFL anyway. But I do see in him a guy that can one day come in and start at that will spot. And to me, that's highly intriguing. Maybe even add some mass and move over to max. So I think there are possibilities there. But obviously, the concerns are highlighted by durability. Is he going to make it there? Can he recover yet again from a devastating injury? I'm also not sure I see enough twitch or fluidity in coverage to feel 100% confident in that area of his game. But if the medical clearance is all good and they feel solid about him, what a deal that would be to get a guy that could potentially be a starting linebacker down the road and to find him this late in the draft. That is huge. So, JB, are you fan of another lottery ticket here?
Yeah, I mean, I think I am always in these rounds anyways because they've taken their special teamers, so that's been covered. It doesn't really make any sense to bring people in who are going to be seventh, eighth, ninth on the depth chart. You don't need camp bodies. So take flyers. When you watch his film, he hits people. I agree with you. He's not going to go down the field. He's kind of like an undersized American, like middle backer, but man, he crushes people. If he can come, like you say, he is somebody to get excited about because his tackle velocity and violence is elite. So like you're looking for a run stopper. I think he's a really nice look.
And then at the end of the sixth round, they drafted my number one ranked running back. We're looking for a guy to replace Dan Adeboboye. I think they found their guy here in Joey Zorn. I don't think Joey Zorn has the same, I don't know if he's got the same upside in terms of his work as a ball carrier, but it's close. And I think his special teams are going to be right there as well. He's a heck of an athlete, 6 feet, 213. And to get a guy with this sort of ball carrying experience and special teams upside that late, to get your number one running back in the draft that late. Yeah, I love so much about him. Great frame, the athleticism. He's leading the U Sports in yards per carry in 2024. North-south runner, keeps his balance well, doesn't get knocked off track. He's tough to bring down too. He runs really hard and he's got soft hands. He can take in passes. And I think maybe what I like most about him is his pass protection, which is very solid. And then we talk about him as a special teams guy. There's so much upside there as a punt protector and as a blocker on kick return too, a guy that you could put in the kick return team like today if he needed to, and you feel confident that he could go out there and do his job. So love the high effort, love the physical playing style. He's going to fit right in for sure, and that is a steal this late. In terms of cons, it's mostly cons running the ball, and I'm just not sure we're going to see him as a ball carrier. But yeah, his pad level can get a little bit high at times. His route running is a bit limited, but I'm not really concerned about those weaknesses when he's primarily going to be out there for special teams and maybe in there as a pass protector. But yeah, that's again, I think the CFL, this happens sometimes where these great athletes, these great positional players too, because he was a star. He's a U Sports star at running back, and there he is at the end of the sixth. It's pretty weird actually.
Yeah, his time, his complete time was really good.
Yeah, he's an athlete.
His film is he doesn't run as he runs. The combine time was faster than how he looked to me on film.
Agreed.
He doesn't pop on film, but if he gets the seam, he does have a gear, right? Like he does, like 4.55 is pretty good. Like he is going to be able to outrun, linebackers. And he's built very solidly. He is going to be a nice special teamer. I agree. I don't want to just say it's an Adeboboye comp, but he will work to try and do what Daniel was able to do. I think that makes sense. He has the potential to be that.
And then last two players in the draft. So in the seventh round, at the end of the seventh round, they pick up Ethan Pyle, center from Guelph. I loved him on tape. I thought his film was excellent. But then the reason he dropped so far on my draft board, and now we're in the seventh round here, so it's an appropriate pick. But I thought he struggled at the combine. I thought his one-on-ones were a little bit rough. And so I brought him down a little bit there in terms of the grading. But you watch his film at Guelph, he looks fantastic. My reservations came from his weight. He weighed in at 284 at the combine, and it just seemed like that was what was causing problems for him. Like what I see in the positives, high effort, toughness, plays with intensity. You see flashes in the run game too, where when he builds up steam, like there's no fear in him. Like this is a guy that loves contact, despite not being a 350-pound hulking lineman. And he's got that sort of gritty mindset, willing to finish plays, wants to do the dirty work and get in there. But he does struggle sometimes with leverage and balance. Hand placement was a little bit of an issue at times at the combine, I noticed. And he didn't really flash the ability to anchor against larger guys or recover once he started losing the reps. So those were things I worry about, to see him get walked back at the combine. I think he needs time, but he'll have time. He's going to have at least a year, if not more, to build up to potentially be a starting center down the road. So with that in mind, seventh round pick, I'm perfectly fine with taking it. And Toronto's shown they're not afraid of undersized centers with Daniel Shin drafted last year as an example. So I thought that's a nice pick at the end of the seventh round.
Yeah, like when you watch, like he has quick feet. I mean, you would have to, right? I mean, you would hope that, in terms of not being huge.
His movement is good, yeah.
Yeah, like, and I think if I like a center there. I think center is a less variant position. You know what I mean? Like if obviously you're not going to find a tackle out here like at this late. So I think a center is like, I don't say it's easier to play, but I think that it is easier. I guess I will say it. It is easier than finding a tackle. I think that's been shown. So I think it makes sense to go center here this late and and work with him and even though he is light, there is an edge to him that I'm sure the coaches loved.
Yeah, this coaching staff has shown they like to see just those little flashes of nastiness from their offensive linemen. And what's so funny is, like, with the guys they have, they're all such nice guys, and yet on the field, they're guys that you don't want to go up against. And it's been like that. It's been like that through the whole Dinwiddie era, actually. Even going back to like Philip Blake and Bladek and those guys, like nicest guys, but then on the field, they're not afraid to get dirty. So I think he fits in that sort of mold. And then the last pick of the draft, I know you love the term Mr. Irrelevant. You've ranted. Yeah. I know you've ranted about how much you hate that. The Argos had the honor of picking the last player in this draft at pick number 72. And I thought this was amazing because they picked my fourth ranked DB, a guy I had ranked 22 overall, and I couldn't believe was still there in the later rounds. That's Demetrius Masuka from McMaster. And the reason he's there, very similar to what we talked about earlier in terms of not having seen him play. This is another guy that I really haven't seen play since 2022. He has been injury riddled. Again, we're talking about multiple, I think it's multiple ACL tears, and I don't want to get that wrong, but I think that's what the case was. And a guy that is not going to be ready to play this year, probably won't be ready to play until the fall, and he's going to do another year of school. I think I heard he was transferring from Mac to Guelph. And so you are losing out on a year of him. But let me tell you about this guy, because I think healthy, he might have been one of the top DBs taken in the draft, because even with those injury concerns and even knowing he wasn't going to be able to play this year, I had him ranked 22. And so that tells you what I see in his skill set. And if he can recover and if he can get that knee back to 90%, he's starting caliber, no question in my mind. So my notes on him: prototypical boundary corner size, physicality. He's confident press man coverage. He's strong. He's got fluid hips, good recovery speed as well. I loved watching him be able to catch up sometimes. The rare mistake that he would make, he was able to compensate for that with speed. Really disruptive at the catch point, physical finisher, and a guy that was willing to come up and stop the run. And I know how important that is in the CFL, especially if you're out in the corner. And this is a guy that could kind of play a few different spots, I think, as he transitions to the CFL. But you love to see DBs who are not afraid to come up, take on blocks, take on runners, redirect runners back inside. And that's what you see from his play. But in terms of the negatives, it's mostly going to center around the injury, the durability concerns. I think we could see a little bit of refinement in his tackling, I suppose, as well. But mostly he's just got to prove that he can get back to form when healthy, and we got to see him healthy. So last pick of the draft, I don't think you can get much more of a steal than that.
No, I mean, like you say, I mean, it is, the fact that if you can get anything in the last round, that's terrific. He does have a nose for the ball. When you watch his film, he is, there's an aggressiveness to him jumping routes or jumping under thrown balls. He is pretty smooth down the field, and like you say, his contact is okay. But of course, I mean, the seventh round there's going to be some flaws, but I think there's definitely enough there. And another GTA guy, I think there's definitely enough there with the quality of his hands to give him a look, because he is really good at getting into spots and undercutting things, and when he gets a chance to tackle, he is also a pretty good tackler.
Let's go now to my conversation with Argos play-by-play voice, Mike Hogan, and then JB and I will come back and wrap this all up and tell you everything you need to know as the Argos head into the preseason training camp, and then regular season is knocking on the door already. I'm joined now by Mike Hogan, a man that you know well. You've heard, you've seen, the voice of the Argos, my broadcast partner, and of course, manager of communications, Toronto Argonauts. He is everything Toronto Argonauts. Mike, welcome. Great to see you. And let's talk a little bit about the draft that occurred this week. I love that you're in a position once again where you're able to sit in the room and give us a little bit of a glimpse into that draft day process. For those who haven't heard before, can you just tell us the story about how this came about? Because I still think this is one of the most fantastic journalism opportunities and sort of fan peek behind the scenes opportunities there is in professional sports.
Yeah, and thank you. It was back in 2014. Jim Barker was the GM, Scott Milanovich was the head coach. And I was working at TSN Radio, and I was the guy that got sick of every year hearing every general manager in every sport say, yeah, we couldn't believe he was still on the board. So I came up with the idea, and I threw it by Barker, and I said, let me go in the room, let me report, and let me say what I see. I won't mention anybody who doesn't get drafted. And he thought about it, and he was kind of, because like for a personnel guy, draft day is their own little personal world. So I didn't expect them to let me in. And he talked it over with Milanovich, and Milanovich said, what a great idea. Let's have him come in. And the only stipulations were I couldn't write on anybody who wasn't drafted, simply for the reason, if the Argos were thinking about two different guys in the first round, they didn't want to increase the value of that player in case they tried to trade for him. Where the team that would have drafted that other player would say, "Oh, the Argos really like that guy. Let's try and hold them ransom on this." So that was it. And that year there were a couple of players who were named in trade discussions that I heard, and I wasn't allowed to report on those either. Other than that, it's just come in and write what you hear, and that's been good. And I always do them the courtesy of running it by them in case there's something that I reported that they didn't want out. And I don't think there's been anything substantial that they've taken out. There may have been like the wording of something that was incorrect or something like that. But I'd always run it by Magri every year or John Murphy or whomever, and they've always said, no, okay, that's good with us, let it go. So, or Barker, I let him read it as well. So yeah, it's a unique experience, and I'm glad the different regimes have let me have at it.
Yeah, it is fantastic. I love the behind the scenes stuff. Like Next Man Up is one of my favorite NFL books, and it really gives you a peek behind a team I hate, but it was still a great read. The Baltimore Ravens, where I think it was John Feinstein spent a whole year behind the scenes and was allowed to talk about most of it, which again, it's so rare in professional sports. And so you giving us that glimpse every year, I think is really cool. So set the stage for us. Draft night, Tuesday night. You enter the room. Argos picking seventh, which is weird for a Grey Cup champ. Usually you're ninth, but there were some strange things this year with Edmonton, using their pickup in the supplemental draft earlier in the year. BC losing their draft pick or forfeiting it to the Calgary Stampeders due to cap reasons, and so here the Argos are picking seventh. Was it a tense room? Was there a fair amount of certainty? How did the room feel?
It wasn't. I mean, they had an idea. They had kind of narrowed it down to five potential picks. But there were two at the top of their board. Ojo was one, and Shand was the other one. And they ended up getting them both. And they had the discussion, well, what should we do if both of those players are gone? And that sort of brought into the other aspect. But when they thought about it, it was, well, Ojo can play this year. He's going to add a defensive lineman. We need defensive linemen. We got decimated in free agency by the CFL, by the NFL, by a trade that they made with Calgary. So they needed to kind of replenish the stocks. So they were going to go defensive line, and those were the two names at the top of the board. There was one other non-defensive lineman that came into the equation, but the other four were defensive linemen. So it was, do we take Ojo or do we take Shand? And the reason they went with Ojo is the immediacy. He could show up. He was good, obviously. He's a player that everybody agreed that was good. And they thought with Shand, as a local kid from Scarborough, having signed with the Bills and gotten decent signing money to go down to the Bills. It wasn't huge, but it was decent. They thought, okay, maybe that'll scare away teams enough that we can slide into the second round and take them. They weren't very confident of that happening, but there was no way that Ojo was going to go that far in the draft. Right. So if they wanted to get both, this was the way to do it. There was talk, and then kind of as usual, the head coach runs the show. And Dinwiddie said, yeah, let's go with Ojo and we'll be comfortable with that. And they did. And then the waiting game began, and it was whether or not they could get Shand or whether they could get trade down potentially in the second round and still get Shand because of the NFL contract. And that's eventually what they did. So when they were able to slide back, improve their fourth round status, and from the last pick of the fourth round to the first pick of the fourth round, and luckily, amazingly, their guy was still there. It turned out to be a pretty happy room after that.
Yeah, that first round, that did not go the way I thought it would. Just like last year, where I didn't think there was any way Kevin Mittal would still be there at 5. It was more all the players that went in the first round this year I liked, but they were not at all in the order I thought. And while the Argos still got their guy, I'm sure it's intriguing still. Just, it's finally upon you just to see, like, where's every other team going with this? And I'm sure there were, curious coaches, looking at the feed coming in just to see, well, who went here. But they do so many mocks in preparation for this. I'm sure they had every scenario played out. But even still, I'm sure there's going to be an eyebrow raise here or there as the draft goes on. For me, who's on the outside, it probably seems a bit more surprising. But are there moments in the draft room where someone does a double take or raises an eyebrow at things that go on?
Picture what it's like going in a football draft or a hockey draft or a baseball fantasy draft with your buddies. And somebody will make a pick, and invariably somebody will go, what a dumb pick. That's stupid. Right? I mean, it happens. It's human nature. Or somebody go, oh, good pick. Oh, yeah, I really wanted him. Welcome to the CFL board or a draft room. That's what it is. I won't say where or which teams, but somebody would get picked somewhere along the line, and somebody would go, what the hell are they seeing? And I'm sure that there were teams saying, why the hell would you spend a second rounder on Shand? He's not going to be here for 3 years, even though he might be here this year, next year, the year after. Or it might be a case of Ryan Hunter, who you wait on and, gets dropped into your lap and you go on and win a Grey Cup. And part of the reason is him. So there's enough Canadian talent with the Argos right now that second round immediately wasn't a thing. Ojo was great that he could come this year. If Shan shows up, great. If he doesn't, okay, we're good. Defensive line isn't going to be a starting position anyways in the ratio, because you'll have 2 receivers and 3 at least offensive linemen and a will linebacker and maybe a 4th offensive lineman, maybe a 3rd receiver, maybe a rotation somewhere, but certainly defensive end wasn't a need, or defensive tackle. So we'll see what happens. But I'm sure there were teams maybe even later down the line were saying, why did you draft this guy? But we were, our guys were guilty of that as well at different spots in the draft. I think that's just human nature.
So the second round comes and a trade is made. The BC Lions trade up. The Argos drop back to pick 19 and still are able to get Paris Shand from LSU. Not a lot of LSU players typically in the CFL draft. That's not typically a school that you get to see that comes up a lot. There must have been, knowing that.
Hey, take that back. Peter Diakowski,
yes,
played for LSU. Argo legend.
Peter legend and
played at LSU.
Yeah, and Players Association legend and everything else. No, Peter's awesome. So it does happen, but it's not as common as, say, Western or something like that. So Paris Shand comes up, knowing how high he was on the board. I have to imagine there's a little bit of celebration at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should point out, I was remiss in not mentioning this. There was fairly significant discussion about trading the 7th pick. Overall, it was brought up often. It would have involved the Argos trading back a little bit, receiving a roster player from another team for 2 draft picks.
Wow!
So that was discussed. They talked about it for quite a period of time, but if that happened, they wouldn't have gotten Ojo probably. And then the odds, obviously, they wouldn't have gotten Shand because they wouldn't have had the second round pick. So right. There was a good discussion, and a call was made just before the pick as well. There had been discussion before the draft started. There was discussion later. So there was a chance that the Argos could have gotten an immediate player plus another pick later than 7. And then, received another pick. The other team would have received another pick. So 2 picks for a pick and a player, but that wasn't done. There was a trade done, as mentioned. They traded with Calgary, were able to slide back, still thinking that Shand would be available because of the contract that he signed with Buffalo. And, there were smiles all around and high fives and kind of a state of disbelief that, did we really just get Ojo and Shand? Ojo was the number 1 defensive end on their list. Shand was the number 1 defensive tackle on their list. They got them both.
And I didn't feel like what made this draft, I think, a little easier on the Toronto Argonauts, and this has been the case for a few years now, is the Canadian talent level is pretty good, especially starting caliber Canadians on this team, that if they hadn't been able to get defensive line, I actually felt like that would have been okay. They could have managed this whole season really without Canadian defensive linemen if needed. But when you've got the luxury of being able to kind of rebuild that positional group from a national standpoint, those players line up perfectly like they did. And you can add to the list that right now is, Tyson Hergott, basically, in terms of guys with game experience, and through 2 picks are essentially able to now kind of stockpile that position. They got 3 guys, one of whom is going to be here right away. And, now you've got a position that if you need to, you could make Canadian, I think, very easily. So it's kind of neat how 2 rounds of the draft, and here you are with what looked like a position where there may not be really any Canadians in terms of potential Canadian starters, to suddenly it being really a position of strength and of youth. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, and you talk about Shan being in the pipeline, as it were, being with an NFL team right now. Who knows what happens with Luigi Bland, right? Who's now in Dallas, I believe. I think this is his third NFL team.
Yeah.
At some point you think he's going to shake free, and whether or not he'd want to come up here after his NFL career, who knows? But he's still a young guy, and there's a chance that he shakes free. So that could be another. That could change the ratio in a hell of a hurry if Ojo shows up and likewise Villaney shows up and Shan shows up. I mean, you could be loading up with three outstanding prospects in an awful hurry on the defensive line, and that would really change the way this team could look.
So no picks in round 3. Round 4 starts, and usually by round 4, that's where I start looking at special teams players. This is usually where my mind sort of shifts to, is who can, you're not necessarily finding first year starters. These are now special teams guys that you can grow into starters maybe down the road. And they lead off the 4th round with, I think, a really underrated prospect because of the fact that he wasn't able to test this year due to injury. And again, that's a luxury that the Argos have in not needing somebody immediately necessarily. Gavin Cokes, UBC interior lineman who can play center, probably a bit of a steal there at the top of round 4.
Yeah, and it's a specific position, right? I mean, you've got Sirocco who can play center, you've got Nicastro who can play center, but I think everybody's comfortable with Pete at guard right now. And then you've got Daniel Shin coming in, so he's the other one. He was a 3-time all-conference player at the University of Alberta. So now you've got another guy who can come in and play center. And, it's just another body in the pipeline. So, there's so much depth on the offensive line this year. I think it would be asking a lot for him to make the roster this year. Practice roster might be another thing, but it just gives the Argos more depth in case of injury, in case of a deal, and in case they decide to go 4 offensive linemen or 5 offensive linemen, depending on how Doc Stater plays. That's an option as well. So you need bodies in that case. And, to spend their 3rd pick in the draft on an offensive lineman wasn't really a huge surprise. And it was, at that time, the offensive linemen were starting to go off the board. So they wanted to make sure they got one of the guys that they liked.
And very next pick, Argos are up again. Was there any sort of feeling of rush, or did they know right at that point, okay, these are the 2 guys we're targeting here?
There was also a discussion about the guy they would pick in the next round in Rayum. And we'll get to him in a little bit. But, like you say, special teams are important in the Canadian Football League. And they got a kid from Windsor that, before the draft, I asked all of the guys in the room, who was a guy that they would most like to see legitimately fall to 7? Ojo's name came up often. Please refresh me on the name. It's the kid from Windsor.
Isfan Asibo Dadzi.
Thank you. I asked all of the guys as well, give me a guy who after 30 you'd kind of pound the table for and say, hey, this is a guy I like maybe more than a lot of others. And that was one of John Murphy's guys that he came out, and that was the first name he mentioned. In fact, I think in that case he was the only one he mentioned that he wanted to go to bat for him. So they got a guy that obviously Murph liked, and they got a guy that everybody kind of liked. So with those 2 picks and being able to move up in the trade in the 2nd round, they were able to solidify those 2 picks and get them both at the top of the 4th round.
Yeah, he's a player I'm very familiar with, and I guarantee Mickey Donovan is going to fall in love with him as well. So
don't forget, Mickey Donovan's brother Patrick is a defensive coordinator with Windsor. So right. You'll see we picked a couple of their kids. Yeah, we got pretty good info on those guys.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to kind of spread your web a little bit when you've got sources all over the country. I think that's pretty cool. So you mentioned Jalen Rayum, Texas El Paso. This was a guy that I actually had taken off my board because I hadn't seen him play in a couple of years. He's had some injuries, but here we are at the end of round 5. If this is a healthy player who's ready to go, even if it's not this year, I think there's something to really like about Jalen Rayum. What was the conversation like at the end of round 5 with this pick?
For those who don't know his story, as you mentioned, he was a player at Middle Tennessee State. In 2022, put up fantastic film. I read in the Calgary, I think it was the Herald, correct me, I hope somebody corrects me if I'm wrong, But they had interviewed some people about potential picks in the draft for the Stamps or Calgary connections. His dad, Thomas, was an offensive lineman and all-star with the Stampeders. Jalen was born in Calgary. That's why he's a Canadian, while his dad was playing for the Stamps. They asked him about him, and Jim Barker said he's the best linebacker in the draft, but you have to worry about the injuries. When you looked at the Argos board, their number one linebacker was Jalen Rayam. That's the guy they wanted. And again, he had an injury in 2023. It was a knee injury. He came back last year. And on the third play of the first game of the season against Nebraska, he suffered another injury. So that's the yellow flag, and that's why he didn't go in the first two rounds, certainly maybe the first round of the draft. The Argos on their list of players on this magnetic board where they have all of the magnets with each name of the player, his had an M next to it. Some had an M for medical, some had N because like the Shan they had signed in the NFL. Some had C for character issues, not necessarily bad, but just, okay, there's a little bit of a yellow flag. And others had an S for they're going back to school. They wanted to go back for another year. This one had an M next to it. And that's the only reason he wasn't off the board. At that stage, it's an incredibly low risk pick. It was 46 or 47. If you don't hit on 46, that's called a normal pick because it's toward the end of the draft. So it was basically a no risk, high reward selection at that point to get one of the players who was listed as the number one prospect. So they got their number one DE, they got their number one DT, they got their number one linebacker, and there was another number one player at another position that I'm sure we'll get to at some point. But they're really excited to get Rayam, but like everybody else, they're kind of going, we got to worry about the knee. But when they talked to the doctors and saw the medical report, they were still okay to take the chance on him. So low risk, high reward.
And speaking of number ones, my number one running back was Joey Zorn, who was sitting there in the 6th round, 55th pick overall. And, it surprised me that he was still there. I don't know if I'm looking at Joey Zorn as an every down ball carrier or anything like that, but just a heck of an athlete and what he did as a ball carrier and with his special teams potential. I was really impressed with his film, his combine, his numbers, and I couldn't believe he was still sitting there in the 6th round. And again, the room must have been pretty happy with that pick to take Joey Zorn from Windsor.
Well, there was no real concern. Like, they didn't need a wide receiver, right? There are 42,000 receivers right now on the Argos. They didn't really need an offensive lineman high in the draft, although if the right guy was there, they would have taken him. But it wasn't a need because they're deep at the position. There's no real need at running back. They bring back Carey, they bring in Brown, they've got McMahon back, so they're set. But you've got a guy who can kind of take that out of a Boye role, who can get you out of game if you need it at running back. He's a guy who could be a 4-team special team player. And when he was at Michigan State before he was at Windsor, and he went there as a safety.
Right.
And came to Windsor, went from a defensive back to an offensive back. So he's got some versatility. He's a hell of an athlete, and he was the number one running back on the Argos board, never thinking that need a running back. But when they saw a guy with that kind of athleticism and special teams capability and a guy who could get you out of a game at running back, hey, at this stage of the draft, it was too good to pass up. So that became the 4th player at the top of an Argo positional chart that the Argos got, plus 2 guys in the global draft earlier. There was one guy they were pretty sure was going to go and did. They didn't need a kicker, and they got the 2 guys that they were debating taking in the first round of the global draft. So it was a remarkably good draft from the Argos. Now, are they right? We'll find out down the road. But from what they put together and from where their rankings are, they got 4 of the top-rated players in their draft and 2 guys they thought might both be gone by the time they picked in the first round in the global draft.
Yeah, it was one of those drafts where, again, I think it puts you in such a good spot when there aren't immediate glaring needs. And I thought some teams where they were sort of forced into a pick or 2 here or there just because of how their depth chart looks. but it's such a luxury when you don't have immediate needs and you can just look up and down and say, this is the best player. And he may not even be here this year, and that's okay. But this is the best player right now. And then going through the last couple of guys like Ethan Pyle, center out of Guelph, who probably needs a bit of time just to add some weight and some strength. He's got great quickness. I think he's a pretty exciting prospect. And then the eighth pick, the last pick of the draft, I was really excited about this guy, Dimitrios Masuka, because I had him in the 20s. I think I had him at 22. And there were some injury concerns. I think 2 ACL tears, I want to say. And a guy that's going to take some time, probably. I think he may go back to school this year as well. But again, not immediate needs to get a guy who could be, if he's able to get back to health, one of the best DBs in this draft as the last pick of the 2025 draft, again, is a steal in terms of value. I love these, I guess lottery tickets is the term that JB and I use a lot. There's such a high ceiling and very little risk with pick 72 overall.
Yeah, and that's it. And I mean, some people, I'm sure there were teams who were looking at our draft selections and going, oh, great, a guy in the NFL and a bunch of guys with injury problems, right? I mean, that's, if they wanted to take a shot at the Argos, that's probably what they do. But, it's not like the Argos don't do, and every team doesn't do due diligence on the medical reports with these guys. That's a big part of the combine, right? It's the interview process, and it's to a large extent seeing if the measurables are correct, because we know schools are prone to doctor those a little bit. And, I'm sure in the past there have been guys who have looked at a roster and seen a guy listed at 6'3", 300 pounds, and you show up and he's 6'1", 240. It's a lot can be done with the tail of the tape. But no, I think that for what the Argos had when you're drafting last, after having won the Grey Cup, and you walk away with 3 gold star prospects and other guys that fit a need, and another guy you just didn't expect who's also at the top of your positional chart. I think that's a really good night for the team. Again, does it pan out? Ask again in 3 or 4 years, or this year if Ojo contributes and the team wins another Grey Cup. That would make the draft a success no matter what happens with the rest of the picks. So, we'll see what happens. But drafting, as you know, is an inexact science, and every team's board was different. There's not a team in the league that would have had the same guys at the top of every positional chart that we did. So you got to take that into account as well. People see players in different ways. Our draft record has been pretty solid. Our personnel decisions have been pretty solid over the last half decade, certainly since COVID. And we'll just kind of, in Pinball and Company, we trust seems to be a thing around here.
You can check out Mike Hogan's article on argonauts.ca. And Mike, before we let you go here, there is Argonauts football coming up in a hurry. So first of all, make sure you go check out that article, get up to speed on the draft and all the details that Mike didn't get a chance to discuss here tonight. And then where can they take their browser after that if they're looking to maybe go to the Argonauts' first home preseason game, hosting the Hamilton Tiger Cats on Friday, May 30th at Guelph Stadium, Alumni Stadium in Guelph. How can they get tickets to that event, Mike?
If you go to our website or Guelph's athletic website, you'll be able to pick up tickets. It will let you know where the Argo fans are asked to sit and where the Ticat fans are going to sit. So you don't have to go in and sit next to one of those stinky Ticat people. You can hang with other Argo fans. That's the easiest way to do it. And also get your tickets for the season opener. We're putting up a banner. We only got to do that 19 times in 150 years. So it's a special night. We hope you can join us for that. And there'll be other bells and whistles if you go to the game. I'll leave it at that for now.
And the home opener is week 2. That's Saturday, June 14th. The Calgary Stampeders are in town. But yeah, I want to see you first at Alumni Stadium in Guelph. That is a fantastic place to watch a CFL game. There's a field of dreams quality to it that I always talk about just because of the fact that you're on campus, the size of the stadium and everything else. It just feels pretty special. So hopefully we can see you there at Alumni Stadium in a few weeks' time. I can't believe the season is almost upon us already, Mike.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's get it going.
Yeah, it's going. It's going. Time is quickly quickly sliding through my fingers right now. I wish I had more of it. But on that note, I will let you go and get back to your time, Mike. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you so much for again giving us a peek into what happens in the Argos draft room yet again.
Yeah, it's always fun, and I'm glad they let me do it. And check out the website for the story.
Take care, Mike. Thanks.
Thank you.
Love talking to Mike. I love that behind the scenes stuff so much. I can't get enough of that. So do make sure you check out his article on argonauts.ca, and you can feel too like you were in the draft room for that, which is the coolest thing in all sports. JB, let's go through some of these important dates coming up because it is going to start happening really quickly. So already May 7th, rookie camp opens. That is just in a few days' time. All first-year players are going to be reporting to their new clubs. Training camp again this year is in Guelph for the Toronto Argonauts. So May 7th is that first day for rookies. And then by May 10th, all teams have to cut down to 85 players, which isn't usually a huge cut at that stage. But it is the first sort of like, let's get serious moment, especially for a lot of those rookies and undrafted free agents that come in. And then training camp officially opens Sunday, May 11th. In the few days after that, that's when we will start our regular podcast season. It'll likely be that Wednesday of that week as we get into our weekly schedule throughout training camp. So that's when you can expect to hear from us next. And then by May 13th, rosters get reduced to 75 players, and that is a meaningful cut with the big cut still to come. And just down the road from that, you've got preseason games. The Argos in Hamilton for their first preseason game. That's Saturday, May 24th at 7 o'clock. And then in their second preseason game, and this is one, as Mike was saying in the interview, you got to get yourself to. It's in Guelph. That's an awesome place to watch a CFL game. Hamilton at Toronto, Friday, May 30th at 7 o'clock. In Guelph. JB, you've watched games down there in that environment. What is it that makes it so special? Because it's not like BMO is not a great place to watch a game. It is. It's fantastic, and yet there's something about watching games at Guelph that I just love. And I don't know. I said to Mike, like there's sort of a Field of Dreams feel to it. What is it about that place that just makes it feel so surreal?
Well, I mean, I think exactly that. I think that it feels, like it's like an NHL game in a small town rink. Like I think it's a very, it's not a huge stadium, and it's, the crowd is usually kind of all jam packed in, and there's no seats. Everybody just kind of sits on the bench, and so it has like a community feel to it. It has kind of, I don't want to say a high school feel, but like it has kind of a small town feel to it, and I think that sort of adds to the magic of it to watch professional athletes in a venue, like seeing a band, in a 200-person venue, right? It's amazing. You're 25, 45 rows back and you're watching it on the screen, and here you're right on top of people. So it has that kind of energy, like you've stumbled across a professional football game somehow. So yeah, it's fantastic. It's a beautiful stadium. The game ops do a terrific job. It's incredibly like professionally run. So it's like this great feeling of like a professional football game, but also like a Saturday afternoon at the park.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. And training camp then wraps up the last day of May, May 31st, and regular season week 1, the Argos start on the road, Toronto at Montreal. But the very next week for the home opener, as Mike Hogan said, they're hosting Calgary. There's going to be all sorts of stuff. There's a banner to unfurl yet again as the Argos are coming off yet another Grey Cup win. Take that, Hamilton Tiger Cats. Well, that will just about do it for us here on this X's and Argos draft special. Again, thanks to Something in the Water for being back with us for another season. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.